Yo, what's up guys, welcome to this video. I'm going to be taking a look at two different tier lists that I've made for different elo brackets. I've made one top lane tier list from Iron to Emerald, and then I've made a tier list from Diamond up to Challenger, making it overseeable for everything. I cover each champion individually, give my thoughts on them, and why I think you should play certain champions in lower MMR, and why you should play certain champions in higher MMR. So without any further ado, let's dive into it, guys.
Every move you made, I was watching you.
To quickly introduce my thoughts on the tier list in general, so I've written down some criteria that I think are very important for picking up or maining a champion around these elo brackets. So from Iron to Emerald, most important criteria that I have is the scaling and carry potential that a champion has, how easy it is to learn to pick up that champion. And what I mean with that is, let's say you play 10 games of Garen compared to 10 games of Riven, you're going to be infinitely better on Garen than you would be on Riven, simply because the champion is way easier to pick up. That's more so what I mean with like the stepping stone. The sustain the champions have, because you're way more likely to have slip-ups or some mistakes during the laning phase. Can be minor mistakes, can be big blunders, but ultimately, the more sustain you have, the easier it will be to still basically bypass those mistakes that you have. Then I have written down, lastly, as side lane potential and more so split push potential. So when you look at the S tier champions that I have selected here, they are all relatively easy to play. They all scale pretty well into the game. They have a lot of sustain, and almost all of them are able to play split push and side lane relatively well, with the exception of Zac in this instance. And that is how I have basically made the meta right now, from my perspective, on the meta for lower MMR. I see this in everything, right? So if you're playing in the lower MMRs, you're going to be more allowed to scale in general, simply because people don't know how to shut you down that well. For example, Kayle, even Mordekaiser, he is somewhat strong, but Kayle and Garen are extremely weak early game champions, but they scale extremely well. If you go even in lane as these champions, very often that means you're actually winning your matchup, simply because you're so weak. So going even is like a victory, and then once you get to the mid to late, you will be outscaling your opponents because gold is more valuable in you, and you're able to do a lot more or be faster. And so, because people don't know how to punish you that well in the early game, these champions just do much better because you're allowed to skill, because people don't shut you down as hard as they potentially could. We're going to talk about this later, but for my higher elo tier list, I have blind pickable as one of the biggest criteria to define the meta. However, whilst I would say counter matchups are of course going to be a thing, they are, with the explanation that I just gave previously, not that important, because people will not be able to utilize their matchup to the full extent. Thus, even though a theoretical counter matchup might be at play, let's say they pick Darius into Garen, you're still going to be fine because your opponents are very likely not going to have enough information to make use of said counter matchup. So that's why blind pickable for me is not that important. So to quickly dumb it down, these are the S tier champions. They all have similar manner. I think Garen is absolutely amazing right now. You're able to play him with crit as well. Kayle, I don't like this champion that much in terms of design, but she's absolutely amazing at scaling. You're gonna get through the early laning phase, you're gonna be fine. Mordekaiser, I think, is extremely good because there's a lot of beefy champions in the meta as well. So you have your Sett, you have Mundo, you have Zac. There's a lot of beefy champions here as well, like your Nasus, right? Your Urgot, Malphite, Yorick. All the champions are, generally speaking, going to build quite a lot of HP. Mordekaiser is a good AP option for that. He's very easy to play, skills well, can split push, can team fight. So Mordekaiser is very good. Tryndamere is very strong right now. You just play Grasp, Hydra, you perma proxy. It's very easy, or it's hard to lose. Yes, you skill amazing, you can split push, you can team fight, has every option. Same for Sett. He's actually, combined with Tryndamere, a very strong early game champion. Sett is amongst the top 5 strongest early game champions because of his passive, giving him an extra auto attack, and nobody's able to stat check that much strength in the early game. Mundo is going to be my favorite pick for lower MMR, paired with Garen, but Mundo right now is my favorite because Mundo is arguably one of the weakest early game champions, but once you get through like your first reset, but especially your second reset and to your first item, you're going to be able to scale as a monster. If you go even in lane as Mundo, you are winning and you will have so much value with gold. So if you learn how to be playing Trade Avoided in the early game and then getting through the laning phase unscathed, then you're going to be a monster. I think Zac is actually just an amazing champion in general. A lot of sustain, can start fighting from level 1, has strong early game, scales well, just an all-rounded good champion, which is pretty easy to play as well. So for the A tier, I think Tahm Kench is good. And again, I do take it into consideration what the meta currently is, but of course the criteria that I have are still going to be there. Tahm Kench, amazing sustain, easy to play. He's like an obnoxious neutralizer that can really bully people out of lane. Poppy, absolutely amazing against any melee champion. Melee bruisers, specifically with dashes. You see a lot of them currently up on the high tiers, right? You have your Gwen, you have your Poppy. I mean, Gwen actually is good into Poppy, but let's say the Fiora, the Camille, and she still does pretty well against champions like these, like Sett and Tryndamere. She can always neutralize, and she is very fine against that, and she beats almost all of the lower champions as well, right? Like, if you play Jax, if you play Riven, you play Irelia, Poppy really just destroys those champions. Pantheon got buffed. He's pretty strong right now, so I've put him in A tier, although I'm not too sure about that. Thing is, he's relatively easy to play. He does skill amazing, especially after level 16. He's strong. Darius, same criteria. Very strong in the early game, therefore an absolute menace to deal with. And if you learn to snowball well in the champion, you're going to be doing amazing. It's a bit harder to execute your win condition sometimes, so I was curious to put this champion on either B tier or A tier. I've went with A tier simply because of him being a top 3 early game laning phase champions, because his stat check is absolutely amazing. 30 AD for your passive level 1, very hard to deal with that. Warwick, no, you can already guess, very strong in the laning phase, a lot of sustain, right? Skills alright, but has almost no split push potential. The way you very often play Warwick is you win lane very hard, but the main concern that I have whenever I would want to play Warwick is that you only have single target damage. You don't really have that much wave clear. You can go Titanic, I guess, to compensate that, which I think a lot of Warwick players do now. But yeah, pretty weak wave clear, only single target damage, so no AoE, you can't really 2v1 people, but you can still kill people on side lanes, skill relatively well. It's just less for team fighting, and you're just more so an early game monster. Illaoi, the exact opposite, a bit weaker in the early laning phase, but you will not get exposed that hard because people don't know how to punish you. She's either A tier or S tier even, but I put her in A tier, and she skills amazing well, is very good into melee champions. Yeah, that's Illaoi. Really good split pushing, and you all know how Illaoi works. Volibear, see, I've seen a lot of different things on the Volibear right now, a lot of weird build paths. I don't even know. I've seen like Rod of Ages and then the new Navoris. Is it Navori? I think they call it Navori. There's a lot of interesting stuff with Volibear. I'm not sure exactly where to put him because I haven't played against him, but I played one game in Korea Masters against a Volibear like this, but he was autofilled, so it didn't really count. But I can see that if your opponent is good or on equal skill, it can be extremely oppressive to play against this, so therefore I put him in A tier. Yorick, weak early game, skills extremely well, split pushes extremely well, A tier for that. Malphite, this one caught me off guard. I expected Malphite to be C tier or D tier, but apparently in terms of statistics, he has an extremely high win rate in a lower MMR. So for me, he's very easy to play. He's a neutralizer. He still has a lot of damage. People probably struggle playing into like the rock that Malphite is. So therefore, he is actually pretty high win rate, and I've put him in A tier. This was one of the champions that surprised me the most. Kled in A tier, very well-rounded champion right now. Can kind of do everything. Win laning phase in the early game. Can team fight. Can split push. Has good items. I really like Kled. It's a champion that I definitely want to try sometime soon. It's a bruiser. I usually, left at the side lane, but I think he's absolutely in an amazing spot right now. Urgot, same thing. Always said that Urgot would spike in popularity again once mythics got removed because he never had a mythic that was good for him, but now I believe he's in a pretty good spot. I believe playing him with fleet is so disgusting to lane against because he'll just permanently sustain and still do a lot of damage. He skills extremely well. So, yeah, Urgot is very good for that. Nasus is kind of similar to what I explained with Kayle, where you lose most of your matchups, but if you go even, you're winning, and you skill infinitely. So, Nasus is amazing. And Gwen is a champion that I believe has a bit more... She is relatively easy to pick up, but at the same time, all her skill relies on spacing, which is something that people, especially more new to the game, can struggle with. And therefore, I think she is very good, but she has a bit more of like the mechanical depth, right? Same with Fiora, same with Camille. Fiora has also a pretty... She has one of the high skill ceilings in the game, but you can still play Fiora on a decent level. And again, the benefit with Fiora is that even though you could be 0-5 in lane, if you get the time to scale, you will always be a monster on 3 items. So that is always there, and therefore Fiora and Camille are both in A tier for me. Moving on to B tier, range champion Quinn. I think Quinn is one of the most obnoxious champions to lane against. Very good with the melee champions. Quinn for me is B tier. Rengar has always been my go-to, how you say it, exotic pick in top lane, where it's like, it's a jungle champion, but he actually works in top. Last year when I was in Korea, there were like 3 Korean challenger Rengar one-trick top laners, and that's where I kind of got the, you know, the inspiration from. Because I don't play it myself. I tried it at the start of the season. It was the highest winner top laner for a very long time. Right now, I believe he's in an okay spot. He's not very obnoxious. He's not super strong. I think also the meta does pretty good against him. Therefore, I just put him in the B tier. Same kind of for Wukong. I feel like Wukong is a melee top lane champion that struggles against any sources of AP damage, has no sustain, but has a lot of stat check potential, and has a pretty good mid game. If you get ahead, you're super hard to deal with, so that's why I put him in B tier. Trundle kind of similar, although I kind of struggled placing Trundle because I haven't seen him much, especially after the removal of lethal tempo. I've put him in B tier because he's insane at split pushing and can skill well, but I wasn't 100% sure where to put him. Ornn and Gragas, they are kind of similar for me. They are lane neutralizers, but these tanks, even though they are pretty, you know, easy to pick up, they're not as easy as a Zac or a Mundo, and that's why I've put him in B tier. Actually, Ornn should be even lower, I think, C tier, but he's gotten some... No, I'll keep him in B tier. I think it could be C tier as well, but he's gotten some buffs to his passes. So there's that. Gragas, I believe, is very strong right now, especially after they have lowered his ultimate cooldown a while ago with 20 seconds. He's played a lot in high elo. He's a lane neutralizer, a lane bully, skills well, but it's more so teamfight oriented champion and doesn't win the game through split pushing, and therefore I don't believe it's a good carry champion in low elo. And that's what you see with most of the champions the more down we go, right? Cassiopeia is a champion I see a lot in the Korean server, and I say everything, of course, with the perspective of being in Korea right now, right? So there's that, but she is very good against melee champions. The problem with Cassiopeia is that she's one of the hardest champions to master in the game, so the stepping stone is very hard. If you master this champion, you're going to be like a nightmare for anybody playing in this MMR, but you're going to need a lot of time investment to be able to do that. So you could call her an exotic champion, but I think there's always been some Cassiopeia top players. Teemo, Vayne, and Twisted Fate and Cannon, I'll put all four of those in the same boat. I believe they are, with Quinn, the best ranged top lane champions right now that you could play. Twisted Fate and Cannon are the best, but they are very susceptible to falling behind. They are the most obnoxious top laners to do with right now. As you can see in this list, I've put them both in S tier. They are extremely strong. However, if you fall behind on Twisted Fate, yeah, it's kind of hard to get back into the game because you're a champion without mobility, even though you have so much movement speed through rushing tier 2 boots and having your ghost and your fleet. If this champion falls behind, it can be extremely lackluster to play him. And same with Cannon. Vayne, Teemo. Vayne skills extremely well. Teemo can still always offer some utility. I mean, same with Cannon and Twisted Fate. The thing is, I think the champions are harder to full carry with. They require good spacing. They require a good jungle tracking because if you fall behind, it's pretty hard. So even though the champions, in my opinion, are good, they're not as solid as you would want them to be right now. And then we have Olaf and Jax. Jax to me was a very surprising factor here. I thought Jax would be S tier because as you can see right here, Jax is an S tier champion right here. He's very high pick rate. He's extremely strong right now. And that surprised me too because they removed lethal tempo, but to be fair, I feel like lethal tempo on Jax is already kind of bait. I think the grass setup was better in almost every matchup because you would win or go even. You skill extremely well. Jax for me is the champion that kind of has everything you would want in a top player. He's extremely strong early game, so you can get priority in almost every matchup. You split push extremely well. Okay in the mid game, that's like his only weak position, I would say. Like after one item, transition to 2 items and 3 items. But good early, okay mid game, good split pushing, good team fighting, good scaling. So he is kind of a dream top laner, but his statistically is not performing that well. So that's why I put him here. Same for Olaf. Very good early game, okay at split pushing and team fighting, not as insane of a scaling, so he's just B tier, but he's easier to play than Jax. And then coming into the C tier, another very surprising factor here was Skarner. Skarner is by far the most obnoxious top laner to play with against right now, period. The champion has a Q uptime of pretty much 100%. You can Q delay on this champion, meaning you pick up a rock, you wait the duration, and the cooldown of your Q is already going to start going. You wait for the duration to go, and then you auto attack, and the duration resets. And then you can basically cycle that, and then you let the duration go every time, and then you throw the rock, or you hit the rock. It has insane range, it has insane AoE, and then you pick up a rock again and repeat the process. You do percentage. I hate this champion. I just hate him with a passion. I don't know why they made this a top lane champion. I hate Skarner more than I've ever hated K'Sante in my life, and I've been playing against K'Sante consistently for the year. I don't want to lane against Skarner ever. I hate Skarner, if you guys didn't know yet. But he is not performing well statistically in a low MMRs, similar to how K'Sante has never performed consistently well in low MMRs. He's a lane bully, he's a lane neutralizer, he has some skill depth. It's so hard to say this, but he has some depth in skill because you need to space or you need to cycle your cooldowns, and if you fall behind on Skarner, you're a pretty useless champion. Your kit has insane potential, but you also need to utilize it well in the team fights. And yeah, if you fall behind, you don't have that much 1v1 potential anymore, and you can feel extremely lackluster playing this champion. There's that. Udyr, yeah, I feel like this is another exotic champion that gets played in top lane, but I just don't think he performs that well. Not the best items, gets outskilled by everything after one item, so not that good. Akshan, even though I think the champion is very strong right now with a lot of potential, I think he's better played in mid lane, and similar to the other range top lane champions, if you fall behind, you are going to be useless. Singed, I just think he lacks the carry potential you want from a champion in the lower MMRs. He can't really split push, that's why I don't think Singed is that good in the lower MMRs. Same for Vladimir, kind of same for Shen, because you rely on your teammates to carry you. And that kind of goes for all of the champions here. I think Irelia has too high of a stepping stone, and that is the same with Riven. So Riven, Irelia here, and Aatrox as well, to be fair. They all three have too high of a stepping stone. They need so much time investment to get good on these champions, and so that's why they statistically always perform pretty poorly in towards the lower MMRs. And even though they have good scaling and they can split push somewhat well and teamfight well, you're more so reliant on just getting through the laning phase unscathed, and that is going to be the hardest part, learning your matchups. And for example, for Riven, you're playing without sustain. With Irelia, you're extremely weak in the early game, and you're very vulnerable into mid to late because you have no mobility besides when there's a minion wave next to you. And Aatrox has a susceptible or like a pretty deceiving skill, you know, how do you say it? Skill ceiling in his champion, and so they just don't statistically play well. And also, I think the items on Aatrox are pretty bad. And Cho'Gath, I think this is a D tier champion, period. However, because of his sustain and his neutralizing factor, I think he performs a bit better towards the lower MMRs, but I still think this champion is too hard to play when almost every item in the game offers movement speed. And yeah, when your champion relies on landing a knock-up, I think I think Cho'Gath's kit is just simply outdated. Moving on to the D tier, these champions are just weak. Weak in terms of items, weak in terms of all the criteria we talked about. So they have bad, well, they don't necessarily have bad scaling, but they just have a hard stepping stone. Like if we look at these 5 champions over here, their stepping stone is pretty hard. Yes, Rumble has a pretty hard stepping stone too. Once you fall behind, it is going to be extremely hard to get back in the game, and you're going to keep dying on all 5 of these champions. Same for Kayle, actually. It's just, if you ever fall a little bit behind on these champions, you don't really have a good fallback pattern to get back into the game, unless you farm into like super late game. Then you can get somewhat back into the game, but that should never realistically happen. I'd much rather have you play like a Fiora or a Camille or a Gwen to do that instead of these champions. They can work, but they require a lot more time investment. For example, Gangplank and Jace and Rumble don't have any dashes, right? So it's much harder. Yasuo and Yorick have some mobility, but it's also situational with the minion wave and landing your Qs. And then Kayle, I just believe she does not have enough wave clear really to like farm up a bunch. She can't really split push. You don't have that insane of a scaling, so you're more so like an assassin. It just doesn't work that well for the top lane. And then we have Sion and K'Sante, 2 tanks in the top lane that just don't perform that well. So those are all my thoughts on each of the champions individually. I think some of the biggest outliers for me here were Jax. I believed him to have a much higher win rate. I also believe Skarner to have a higher win rate. And I think most of the other champions don't surprise me that much. So yeah, again, the most important criteria is to just get your scaling checked, you get your split pushing in order, your sustain, I guess your wave clear, and then you're gonna have high resources and you're going to be able to be good into the game. So these would be my recommendations to play between Iron and Emerald. And let's move on to the higher elo tier list between Diamond and Challenger. The biggest change that will occur is that matchups are much more important, simply because people will know how to expose you in a matchup. You're never going to get away with blind picking a Nasus and getting unscathed to the early game unless your opponent is auto-filled. Simply because you'll either get counterpicked, right, or enemy jungler knows how to shut you down, and all in all, the higher elo you go, the less likely it's going to be for you to play a champion, blind pick them, and get away with that champion. So blind pickable, like your champion needs to be blind pickable as one of the highest criteria. the higher MMR you go. And so I say that it's matchup dependent picks. The other criteria that I have is that I want my champion to still have some scaling and carry potential, because if your champion can lane well but also still skill, that is a plus, right? So scaling is always a good thing. And then I have that my champion needs to have an all-rounded profile, meaning that it's good in the laning phase, it can still hold his ground in the side lane, and it can also team fight, so it has a more all-rounded profile. And if we look at these 5 champions right now that I have put in the S tier, all 5 of them have it. They are very lane dominant champions. I think the least lane dominant champion here is Camille, but she's still extremely impressive in the early game, and in a lot of other melee champions she is still able to do extremely well. In the past, if I were to play Riven into Camille, I would say this matchup was pretty good for me. Right now, if Camille goes grass and she has a FH, she has so much movement speed that it's just impossible for me to try and out-sustain her. She has a lot to sustain in her kit, but also to try and space her because of the sheer amount of movement speed that the champion has with levels in her cube. It's nerfed a little bit, but she's still extremely strong. And of course, the rest of the tier list in this one is much more centered around the meta, because you're never going to be able to pick, let's say, a Nasus when those champions are in the meta, right? Just as an example. So most of the champions are also put in order depending on how the meta is, simply because matchups matter a lot more the higher elo you get. So talking about Skarner, I've already went over him. I hate this champion. He is, in my opinion, the strongest champion. They are nerfing him. They're nerfing his base health and I believe a bit health growth as well. So that might get outdated pretty fast, but I still think this champion is so obnoxious to play against. It has way too much damage, way too much fallback patterns, so much utility. It just has so many things. I hate it. Same with Twisted Fate. He has less fallback patterns, but it is very hard to fall behind on the champion if you know how to pilot him. You can get prio in almost every matchups. You're able to be super flexible in terms of build path. You always go tier 2 boots, but you can go for the boots of swiftness. But let's say you play against some more AP heavy tops, like you just get your mercs, or else you just go for your tabis, and you're always very stable in the laning phase. You have Flesh Ghost, you control the wave, you have a lot of gold income because of your passive. And as, for example, if I play Riven into Twisted Fate, I feel like I need CDR for gap closing, I need mercs for his stun, and then I need tabis because he's building AD. So it is so hard to play against this champion when also all the tenacity in the game is being removed. Well, not all of it, but a lot of tenacity. For example, the tenacity tree got removed. So Twisted Fate with a point-click gold card just goes up in priority, especially when he's able to build AD on a champion that you kind of, like I said, want to build mercs against because of the tenacity. Same with Cannon. I think First Strike for him against melee champions has been a really big added benefit that he can make use of. I don't know exactly why Cannon spiked so high, but he's played a lot in professional play again as well. I played against it a lot in Korea. I even played against an 80 Cannon. I think the champion is very strong again, and I hate it whenever he is meta as a melee bruiser top laner, but he is strong. We've covered Camille already, and I've kind of covered Jax already as well in the lower MMR. It's simply a champion that has everything. He's very stable, skills well, and does everything you want from a top laner. We've already kind of talked about the qualities that all the champions have in the previous list. We just reordered them with the mindset that the amount of time investment should not be a factor anymore of how strong a champion realistically is, and matchups are more important. So for example, Riven is in a really good spot right now. In low MMR, you need a lot more time investment, and you know, she doesn't do that well because if you make a mistake, your laning phase is instantly over. But here, people will know how to play their laning phases, they'll know how to play Riven, and so she spikes up to high A tier. She's not S tier because every champion in S tier just basically beats her, and a lot of champions in A tier still beat her as well. But if you play Riven into most of the champions that are not S or A tier, she beats almost everybody. So that's how you kind of look at the rest of the tier list, right? The tiers above beat the champions below. So we could talk about each champion individually, but we've kind of already done that. So the biggest takeaway for me here is this is how I see the top lane meta over in the higher MMRs. And again, the biggest takeaway is that matchups just simply matter a lot. That is going to be it for my view on all champions in League of Legends for top lane meta right now. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and if you want to see more of this type of content, please let me know down below, and I wish you all an amazing remainder of your day. Peace.